I guess we can start. Maybe someone will come later, I don't know. So let me introduce you Ivan Sysoev.
Hello.
He's a sound designer and composer, and he will tell you about music creation.
Hello. It's very nice to see you. We have such a small private conversation, I guess. First of all, the disclaimer. I'm sorry. Organizers have asked me to speak English, and this is a big challenge for me, so I'm sorry for mistakes and other stuff that can happen during my speech. If I say something unclear, feel free to interrupt me and ask what exactly I'm talking about. It's totally fine. Don't be shy. This presentation is for the game developers and the novice composers, for both of them. I will explain some important things about the soundtrack and music production for the both sides. Disclaimer number 2. That means only. How does the music increase the game revenue? Let's imagine a situation. You are a composer. You come to the person who runs the game development and ask and tell the person, hey, do you want my music in your game? And then he or she asks you, why do we even need a soundtrack in our game? You can think, man, that's a dumb question. Everything has a soundtrack. All games have a soundtrack. All movies have a soundtrack. Even gambling machines have a soundtrack. What's the point? But many people think that having a soundtrack in media product is an axiom. No one needs an explanation. But why exactly do we need a soundtrack? Any ideas? Yep.
Because soundtracks in art makes you feel like you are in the situation you are watching. It makes you feel like more you are in. For games, it makes you feel like you are in the game more than if it doesn't have a soundtrack. You interact better.
But for example, if I'm the boss, how can you prove it? How can you convince me that I should hire you? Why your statement is true? What do you think?
Just give him a listening music to the end, because it could produce different emotions for him depending on the soundtrack, for example.
So you offered to show him the references, I guess.
Yes.
So okay, that's I will tell about the real reason. First of all, everyone should notice that the game development. That the game development is a business. Every developer wants to have a reward. It could be money, it could be respect, it could be fame, whatever. But every feature you add into the game should have a purpose. And the soundtrack is not an exception. Both composer and the game director should understand how exactly a soundtrack will help everyone to make money. Talking about money is the best way to have a conversation. Such abstract things as beauty and drama can't be measured, but the metrics can. I read a bunch of interesting research. One says that people is more effective at work if they are listening to music. Their concentration is higher. They feel more comfortable. It's actually said that I can listen to the music while I'm working. Also, people more relaxed when they're in a restaurant where the music plays. Same thing for games. Effectiveness of playing increases if players listen to the music, even if it's music not from a game. It can be a radio in the background, and it will still affect the gameplay. The other research says that if any music is playing on the background, heart rate of a player increases. Music can be unrelated and it still works, but if the music related to the game, heart rate increases even more. Now look at those graphs. Here is some researches, comparison audio versus no audio. You can see that in the game like Osmos, when the audio and the music is on, the heart rate increases. In the flat out, the difference is really, really high. In Omnisphere, we can see the same picture. So, what it gives to us? It gives us the metrics. High heart rate means more emotional reaction, and it affects engagement and retention as a result. More effective player has a bigger lifetime, and more concentrated one has a longer daily session. That means that the soundtrack increases the key metrics of your game. It's really important, and that leads us to the higher revenue. When you want someone to hire you, when you're a composer, you should explain why your work is useful. And when you're a game developer, you should understand why should you invest money in the soundtrack. Any questions about this? Okay, let's move on. When should the composer start writing a score? All the composers community will answer, you should hire a composer as soon as possible. But why? Actually, it depends on the product. To be marketed on storytelling. A music can be illustrative or narrative. The purpose of an illustrative music is simple. Something's happening and the music illustrating this. A combat, a sad or happy moment, a relaxed gameplay, end of a level, victory or defeat, whatever. If there is no storytelling, in your game, the music can be illustrative. It's totally fine. Match free, tower defense, farm, fighting, MOBA, etc. This case you can hire a composer later when the mechanics are completed and you have a prototype. But make sure you give enough time to composer to score. If you have a big storytelling in your game, you must hire a composer as soon as possible. This case, the music can be narrative, and it will make storytelling even more powerful. Why? Because the music can tell the story itself separately. It's similar to comics. I'll read an excerpt from The Watchmen. It's a graphic novel by Alan Moore, I guess. Here's the excerpt. Rorschach's Journal, October 12th, 1985. Joe Crackers analysis this morning. Tried right on burst stomach. The city is afraid of me. I've seen its true face. The streets are extended gutters, and the gutters are full of blood, and when the drains finally scrap over, all the vermin will drown. The accumulated filth of their sex and murder will form up above their waists, and all wars and politicians will look up and shout, save us. And I look down and whisper, no. Now, let's read it again, but with the pictures from the novel. Rorschach's Journal, October 12th, 1985. Door carcass analysis this morning. Tried on a burst stomach. The city is afraid of me. I've seen its true face. The streets are extended gutters, and the gutters are full of blood. And when the drains finally scrap over, all the vermin will draw. The accumulated filth of all the sex and murder will form up above the waists, and all the whores and politicians will look up and shout, save us. And I look down and whisper, no. In this excerpt, pictures doesn't match the text. Pictures show us the blood and the smile pin. We can understand that someone important is dead. There is a mad guy with a poster. The man who is washing blood like it's a regular thing. It shows us the city's atmosphere. And as the view becomes higher, I have no pictures, but the camera is moving higher. As the view becomes higher, we understand that the dead man fell from a height. I don't know, sorry. But Rorschach is telling us about the city and the citizens. The text and pictures are telling us different things, but they're working for the storytelling. And the music can do the same thing. Same thing, exactly like a comics. To make the music tell a story, you should think about this at the beginning of the development. Soundtrack can do extraordinary things in storytelling. If you hire a composer too late, when the dialogues are written and the drama is shown visually, the only thing he can do is to write an illustrative music. And you will lose lots of player emotions. You should develop an art, scenario, and the music at the same time. I have not enough time to tell you how exactly it works, but you can watch my previous lecture about dramaturgy of the music. Ask me later and I'll give you a link. So, any questions? Okay, let's move on. Why there is no gameplay music in the Battlefield multiplayer? First of all, any ideas? Yep.
Because as a player you need to speak with your team, and like the music will like interrupt you. Like you won't enjoy it, you need to communicate with other teams.
Why can't you just increase the volume of the voice chat?
It's like you have to hear steps running or something else.
Interesting.
And also it's difficult to predict the time of the game. I mean, in some cases the music should be very intensive, in some cases it should be really slow, but we can't predict in the multiplayer game how it would be.
Exactly. That's the point. There is no music in games like CSGO, Battlefield, Overwatch, etc. In games like this, there are too many different situations. You can engage, you can sneak up from behind, you can do lots of things. Situations are changing so fast that even if the music adapts to the gameplay, it can't keep up. 1 second you're sitting in the sniper spot, and the next one you're running away from 12 enemies. In games like this, situations change rapidly and unpredictably. In Quake Champions, for example, there's only one situation. You're running around and non-stop shooting everywhere. So there is a music in Quake Champions because the situation is predictable. And sometimes you really don't need the music. Should I tell something about adaptive music or interactive music? What do you think? Okay, we'll talk about it later. So, the next part. Why there are no dubstep game soundtracks? Now we know about the purpose of the music. We decided whether we need music or not. And we decided should it be narrative or illustrative. Now we're closer to music production. Music production consists of 4 parts. Oops, sorry, that meme. The idea, the realization, mixing and mastering. The first and the second parts are clear. You generate an idea and you do things in your software. The mixing is the process when you mix instruments and sounds with each other to make them sound good. It's simple. You make punchy drums, white and soft strings, deep bass and the other stuff. The mastering is the process when you pick your mixed track and make it sound good and loud enough on your target platform. For example, if you do the mobile game, the mix should sound good in mono, almost without bass and super high frequencies, because most of the phones have one really bad speaker. For example, mine. It's really small. It's one. The sound is mono. Each target platform has its own specific requirements: YouTube, iTunes, SoundCloud, vinyl, mobile, CD, cinema, etc. So the mastering is the thing, One of the most important values in mastering is the dynamic range. What is dynamic range? Dynamic range is the difference between loudest and the quietest sound in the mix. For example, your loudest sound is a 0 decibel and the quietest sound is a -7 decibel. That means the dynamic range of track is 7 decibels. I show something. Video. So here is dynamic range. This is the loudest sound. This is the quietest sound. So this is dynamic range. Interesting thing that in sound engineering, the loudness scale is reversed. In real life, 0 decibels means no sound at all. But in the engineering, 0 decibels means the loudest sound that speaker can produce. And the -infinity means no sound at all. So, is it clear? It's very important. Okay. So back to the mastering. The situation. Does anyone produce music? No. Okay. It's an interesting thing. You have wrote a track. You've mixed it. It sounds well. You exported it. But then you realized that each round shape of you is much more loud than your track. Then you jump back into the DAW, digital audio workstation, the software. Put the gain up at maximum level. Your loudness meter shows huge overload. You export track once again and hear the awful distortion like in John Cena memes, That's called clipping, by the way. But even after that, shape of view is louder. Why? When we hear a track with a small dynamic range, it sounds louder for us. It's how our ear works. The real loudness, the sound intensity, is the same. But the less difference between loudest and quietest signal, the louder sound we hear. When you're increasing the gain in your DAW, digital audio workstation, you put the all mix up, and loud signal starting to clipping. They hit the cell, you know. What should you do is to put the quietest signal up to reach the fine dynamic range. After that, your track will sound much more loud. And bunch of music genres, such as hip-hop, EDM, pop, dubstep, rest in peace, sounds good only if they have a small dynamic range. It's a style, you know. They simply just don't work if the dubstep track has a wide dynamic range. That dynamic range is about 3 decibels. It's very small, you only need to know. It's like a sound sausage. The whole track is a sausage with a flat sound. It's a style, it's fine. What happens if you try to use your track or any popular track in a game? There's voices, for example, right here. Below them, ambient sounds, wind, leaves, something. Above, loud and short sound effects such as explosions, shots, etc. When you put the soundtrack in the mix, it overlaps everything. It's loud, it's long, and you can hear voices and the ambience. Even explosions will sound awful because they are in the same loudness level as the music. So I try to draw it to explain. For example, this is your mix. The voices, ambience, short and loud sound effects, right here. And this is the space for your music. And you pick the dubstep track and put it right here. So it overlaps all this, because this is its dynamic range. Here it is, here's the track. It overlaps this, and this. You can hear anything. As a result, you can hear no voices, no ambience, and no short sound effects. What can you do? What can you do? What do you think with this? You have a dubstep track, you have voices, you have ambience, you have explosions. What can you do? Any ideas?
Increase dynamic range for other sounds? Make it louder.
The problem is, it's impossible. When the track is rendered, its dynamic range is fixed. Nothing you can do. The answer is simple. You just decrease the volume of the track. But what happens in this situation? When you do this, you move the whole sound sausage down. Now it's here. For example, here. And it's really quiet and not enjoyable. You can increase the volume to illustrate the game situation, for example, if there is a drama, you know. Because when you do this, the all mix would be ruined. The small dynamic range soundtrack loses both of the functions, and illustrative and narrative. It can only be on background, quiet background. And that's the reason why the popular tracks are not used in cinema and games, only as a background, you know. The dynamic range of movies and games is very wide, about 40-60 decibels is a tremendously big number, you know. It means that loud stuff is loud, but the quiet things is almost not audible. So your track should have a wide dynamic range too. Yeah, it's quieter than Gucci game, for example, but it will make possible to work with an actual dynamic when you want to, you know, show the drama. As I said before, you can compress the track right in the mix when you need to, but the reverse process is not impossible. You can make wider rendered soundtrack. By the way, that's the reason why the TV commercial is so loud. The actual loudness is the same as the cinema, for example, the movie. They do the same thing. They compress the sound to make it as loud as possible. And there's an interesting period in the music history called loudness war. Google it, it's a really interesting thing. It's all about how labels compress tracks to be louder than other labels. Because louder track is more attractive, more enjoyable, etc. All the music became flat. Chorus and verse had the same loudness, and they were not dynamic at all. All the tracks, for example, Red Hot Chili Peppers, ZZ Top, were completely flat. Toots, toots, toots. And many bands and singers suffered from this. So, dynamic range of the soundtrack should be wide. Even there is no music producers. There are no music producers, I guess. But if you're a game developer and someone sends you a track, you should check the dynamic range. It's an easy stuff. You should just download some software and look at the number. And if it's about 3 or 10 decibels, the track won't fit the game. It's just how physics and how ear works. It can be only on background, not illustrative, not narrative. So, any questions?
Just maybe have a comment, because I tried to remember any games that have actually dubstep music in it, and I remembered one. This is one of the most beautiful examples in the game. It's Far Cry 3, Skrillex, Bob Marley song. And
Make it Bendon, yeah, good song.
This situation was really, I think, interesting experience. So in some cases it could work, I think, yes.
In some cases, but the situation you are talking about has no, I don't know how to say. The situation is predictable. You just have a flamethrower and burn the wheat. You know, all you do is to burn the shit up. And this case, all the sounds are loud. A flame, an explosions, enemy shots. There is no voices and there is no ambience. Only shouts, screams. This case, yeah, dubstep could work, but it's not the rule. It's an exception. It's an exception. Of course, there is, for example, the Doom soundtrack. It's heavy metal, industrial metal. It's really drive, but they use such a technique as adaptive music that when the situation is like yours, when we don't need to hear voices and ambience, the music can be loud and powerful with a small dynamic range. But when the situation changes, music adapts and the dynamic range becomes wider and the music becomes more wide. But that's a good comment because there is a situation that where dubstep and metal and other things can work. In movies, and the same thing. Remember the Suicide Squad? In the beginning of the movie, there's 4 or 5 popular tracks, and some things happen. But it's an exception. It's only an illustrative and background thing. It's not a common soundtrack. It's a style. It's a scene. You know. The next part, ear versus gear. Now it's about mixing. 20 years ago, you had to work with the real huge analog equalizers and compressors to do the mixing. Nowadays, you can just download them from the internet and work wherever you want with your laptop. But then, why people still work in studios? The other important term we're going to talking about is frequency response. It means how loud does the speaker play different frequencies. For example, let's some speakers frequency response graph. You can see that it plays high frequencies more loud, low frequencies quieter, and the mid frequencies are almost flat. It's fine. Is it clear? Frequency response.
Does this graph represent some actual speaker?
Yeah, I googled random loudness meter, frequency response graph and put it into my presentation. I want to be sure that you understand what I'm talking about. Please tell me in Russian what is this thing. Who will?
График отклика частот, и чем ниже частота, тем тише играет звук, чем выше частота, тем выше, но это зависит от самого, собственно, динамики, да.
Sure. When you do the mixing on speakers with curved frequency response, final mix can sound perfectly on your stereo system, but fall apart when you play when on other speakers. There are two reasons why speakers have a curved frequency response. First, it's designed for the house use, for the cars, for the cinemas, etc. It's a common product. The second one, they're just bad. Nothing you can do with this situation if the speakers are just bad. The idea of the mixing is to make a track sound good on speakers with a flat frequency response, completely flat. If you do this, home stereo system will apply its curve to your track the way engineers predict. This speaker is designed to play the flat mixed music. To do this thing, you need studio monitors. Studio monitors are speakers with a flat frequency response and no panorama at all. Hi-fi stereo system also not only have a curved frequency response, but wider panorama, Left thinks is more left, right thinks is more right, etc. Studio monitors are speakers with flat frequency. It gives you a real sound. You should mix, when you do the mixing, on studio monitors. But why can't we use headphones? Because when you work using headphones, your left ear can hear only left channel, and your right ear can hear only right channel. And when you use monitors, left ear hear both left and right monitors. Same thing for the right ear. You will do the better pan. Pan is a thing when you put for example, strings a bit left, the bass a bit right. Of course, you can mix in the headphones, but the final mix would sound well only in headphones too. Is it clear? Any questions?
So can you make something specific if someone is using headphones and something specific for the speaker? And because you don't know what the player will use.
You mean different tracks?
Can you repeat? You are working in headphones or what?
You said the problem of headphones, the right part only can be heard by the right ear, and the left part. Like if you handle the situation in if you do it for speaker, like you you focus on the right, not all of the sound is on the right. So will it work on headphones as well?
Yeah, it would work because all the audio now is a compromise. You can't do a bunch of mixes for YouTube, for SoundCloud, for headphones, for cars, for speakers, etc. The idea is to find the compromise thing. Working with studio monitors, it's an amazing experience. You sit right here. You have a triangle 60, 60, 60. I don't know how to say in English. Разносторонний. And left monitor is here, right monitor is here, and it produces the flat sound with no panorama. And you actually can't hear the speaker's position. All the sound becomes like a half circle. When you sound any track, for example, Hans Zimmer, Time, in the monitors, you hear the whole actual orchestra. You hear that brasses are there, that drums are there, the piano are there, and it's amazing. But it can be heard only on studio monitors. The other speakers can do this thing, but it's a compromise. That's the world we live in. That's the way the tracks produced. Clear?
Yeah, thanks.
It's all about compromise. You can do the best mix for everything. Also, you need a sound card. It's a thing that connects to the laptop and connects to the monitors, and the room. The room is the biggest issue because you can easily, maybe not easily, buy a laptop, buy a sound card, buy a couple of monitors, but to buy a studio or the flat, it's a real thing. But the even more interesting that there is no perfect room. Any studio has its own issues, and you should just live with that. It's the compromise again. So, any questions about the studio, about the monitors, about headphones? That was a good question. Maybe you have another one. You can ask me in Russian. It's totally fine. No? Okay.
Is there any metric for a good studio, like sizes of the walls, the width, overall area, overall the height of the ceiling?
Yeah, building a studio is a big engineering work. I'm not engineer, I don't know any about this, but there is a lot of books, a lot of specialists that can build a good studio. I know the simple things, like you should put the soft material in corners, because low frequencies resonate very intensively in corners, etc. But it's a huge work, and there's lots of professionals that do it. But in real life, you can actually live without room. You can just do the many tests. You can export your mix, listen it to your head, in your headphones, in your car, in friend's car, in other flat, in other speakers, and you can just make a compromise again. Because working this sound is really expensive. It's really expensive, and you can make a fine result without such an investment. When you have lots of money, of course, it would be better if you buy yourself a studio. But in the real life, you can work fine without it. But the studio monitors, you must obtain them. Must. Yeah.
The minimal requirement for good home-produced music is a sound monitor and the audio card, and it's just laptop, right?
What does the audio card
Or maybe
do?
something else.
What does the audio card do? Like the sound card?
I try to explain the simple way. When you work with digital sound, you work with synthesizers. It's the plugin that produces the sound, generate sound waves, and the samples. Samples is the pre-recorded parts of something. For example, when you're producing the orchestra track on your laptop, you have a plugin and other people long time ago recorded every string note, A, B, C, D, E, F, in different loudness, in different position. And when you press the button, the sound producing. Sorry. So, what exactly does the sound card? It takes all the counting from the laptop into it. So it's designed to вычислять, count? Calculate. It's designed to calculate the digital sound. And when you export tracks, when you record your, for example, guitar or microphone, the sound would be better. And the laptop will work more effective. For example, if you work without the sound card, you throw the flutes, the brasses, the drums, the guitar, the strings in your laptop. It overlaps all the operative memory, and your laptop starts to lagging as I don't know, lagging very strong. But if you have a sound card, your pool of free memory for the sound production is much bigger, you know. So that's the thing that sound card does.
And what about the minimal requirements for good sound production like
Yeah, first of all, it's a laptop or computer, PC, Mac, anything. Sound card, monitors, sound card to connect the monitors to the laptop, and the room with a furniture. Because if the room is empty like this, you can hear this thing, a tremendously big reverberation, echo, and it will affect your mix. You're sitting in the room, you're mixing the tunes track, and when the drum sound is playing, the real sound is toots, but in your room you hear toom. And when you will listen to your mix in other speakers, you can hear the whole mix is ruined actually. So the furniture, the Soviet furniture, I know, furniture from IKEA is a little bit solution, because the more furniture you have, the more sound is absorbed. The more sound absorbed by it, and the less echo you have, and that's a really important thing. The worst idea is to come here with the speakers and mix the track here, because there's a big reverb. So that's the answer, I guess. Really important thing, but that you can actually write a score using everything. Personally, when I'm working with sound or with music, I work in the little Sennheiser clip headphones, because no matter what's comfortable for you to produce the music, the notes, but when you mix and master the track, in this case you should use a professional gear. But if you don't have one and you have some money, you can just outsource it. There's a bunch of great guys who have an equipment and do this. When you write the music, no matter what the gear you use, it should be comfortable for you. But when you mix and master it, the professional gear needed. So that's the answer, I guess. Is it clear, or anything?
Can you tell a bit more about mixing and producing music? It's like the difference. So when you at first write music, you use only one instrument, and when you mix, you add different ones. It's like you split the track. Or
again, please.
Okay. So you told that there are 4 stages of music production.
Yep.
The idea is that you write music and then you mix the music. So when you write music, you write it only for one instrument, or and then when on the stage of mixing, you add different instruments.
No. There is no rule of composing. You can do it the way you like. You can start from the chord sequence, start from the melody, start from a drum sequence, whatever. There is no rules. Before mixing, you need to have all the notes written. All the instruments are added. And actually, no. You just do the way you like. You're sitting and you hear, oh, I want a C chord. Yeah, it sounds fine. I want a drum here. You add the drum and it's fine. And only after that, when all the track is completed from musical point of view, after that you should mix.
So what does mixing exactly?
Mixing, it's when you have all the instruments, for example, guitar, drums, anything. You make them sound good with each other. For example, the kick drum and the sub bass. You should make. They are playing both in low frequency, the bass and the kick drum, and you should do the thing when your kick drum is heard and the bass heard is too. You should remove the frequency conflict between them. To do this, you cut some frequencies, you compress the sounds, you put the sounds more left or right, and you will do and you should do this with all the instruments. That's what the mixing. Mixing is equalization, cutting and adding the frequencies, for example. Oh, that's so bass boosted, I'm gonna cut some bass. Compressing, it's like about dynamic range. You make quiet sounds louder, and as a result, you, for example, have you heard a drum kit in real life with no gear? Just a drum kit. It sounds like a box, like a country. This drum kit can be expensive as a flat, I don't know, as an apartment, but it still sounds like a carton box. The reason is in the mix. For example, the snare drum is compressed. In real life, you hear the box hit sound and quite high frequency clicks. You know, in the mix, you make clicks more loud, and as a result, the drum has a nice punchy sound. You know. So that's the compression. Is it clear? The third part of mixing is panoramic and reverberation. Reverberation is echo. You know, when you, for example, playing the piano and the piano sounds like it's in front of you, you can move it away from your face using reverberation. An echo. When you add an echo, the instrument sounds like in some kind of a room. You know. In a concert hall, in a cathedral, something like that. And move it, for example, a bit right, because there's a guitar, for example. So that's the mixing. You have drum and bass. Here, you have here the piano, you have here the guitar, and you have here the vocals, for example. That's the mixing. Is it clear?
Yes.
And just to remind you, the mastering, it's the process after mixing. When you do sound loud enough with a fine dynamic range and make it sound good on a target platform. Actually, when you do the mastering, I lied a bit. You do different versions for a radio, for an iTunes release, and for YouTube clip. That's a common thing. So. Any questions? Any more? So the process. Choose a DAW, digital audio workstation. There's a bunch of them, such as FL Studio, Ableton Live, Reaper, Cubase, whatever. Actually, their difference is so small that you can just randomly choose one of them or the interface you like and work with it. They are working in the same idea. These things are sequencers. Sequencers mean there's a bar that moves from left to the right and play everything it hits. For example, I show you. There's the drums. It's a kick. It's a snare. And there is a bar. It moves from left to right, and when it hits the rectangle, the sound plays. That's the way how all the sequences works. You just take a note, put it into the right place, and hit the play button. So there's no difference. Just choose the one you like. Also, there is macOS exclusives such as Pro Tools and Logic Pro. It's a fine those two. The second step, find a team. The best way to start a music production career is to do something with your friends or with the team or with your classmates, anything. Because when you have no experience, and you came to someone and say, "Hello, please hire me. I want to make music." It's really pathetic, I guess. So the best way is to find a team. When you have good relationships, it's fine to fail sometimes. You can discuss some things, and if you are not doing music right now but want to start, the best advice I can give you, find a team. It's, I think, the only way, because live conversation is much more cool than an internet. There is no particular reason why some random person should hire you to make music when you did nothing in your life. So there is the point. Find a team and work together. It's a real key to do, I think, anything in the life. Find people to do something. It works not only in music, it's my philosophy, I think. You just should networking with the people and work them and do the things, you know. If there's a miracle and they hire you and you now working together, before you start to think about music, you should research everything. You should read the script, if there is a script. You should listen to idea. You should look at all the concept arts. You should ask all the dumb questions you have. For example, there's a concept art of a sword, magical sword. And the artist and the game director says, write the score, the sword's theme. No, you should ask, who exactly created the sword? When you hold this sword, is it spooky, or you feel yourself like a holy warrior? You should have as much information as you can, because I guess it's how our intuition works. Intuition is when you make a decision without thinking about this. You just know it. You don't know why. And when you have a big experience and the people tell you that the sword is created by the wizard and the sword is spooky and etc., in your head you usually can hear the sound already. That's how intuition, that's how creativity works. I think it's part of philosophy again. Ask about everything, any dumb questions. Why this demon is red? What kind of energy is this? Is it plasma? Is it electricity? Is it gravity? Everything is important. You can't do the tablica.
Table.
You can't do the table. Yeah, the sword is doing the gravity thing. It's fine to just listen to the answer, and when you later will think about the music, the idea will come to you much easier. And the probability that music will be good is much higher, I guess. Music can work as a concept art. Back in my days when I worked in indie teams, there was a situation when we developed a game without game design document and without concept arts, without everything. We just did some stuff. But I have no idea what to do, so I just produce music, just do it. And it worked as a concept art. The whole team, the programmers, the artists, the game directors, the game designers, listened to my music and imagined what can happen when this music plays. It's a bit awkward way to work, but when you are indie team, it's totally fine to do things like this. Don't waste much time for mixing and mastering. When you're working in a team and you scored a fine track and you want to show them, don't waste much time to make it perfect, because there is a situation when you know that your mix is lacking in something and it's annoying you like hell and you don't know what to do. But when you play your music when the other person listens to your music, it says, whoa, it's really fine, because the person has no idea how you want to your track, how you как вы хотите, чтобы ваш трек звучал.
How you want it to sound.
How you want your track to sound.
Yeah, exactly. They have no background. They just listen to it and say, yeah, it's cool. So when you're working, don't waste time. You wrote the score, show it to the team, ask them for their opinion. The next step, waste all the time for mixing and mastering, but it's for different situation. For example, if you are not currently hired and you're looking for a job, usually you go to the person and say, hey dude, let's make music. And to impress them, you should invest a lot of money and the time in the mix. because in this case it should sound perfectly. Because in lots of cases there's hundreds of people that do the same thing. They come to the person and tell him exactly the same words, and so the person should choose, and he will. One of the important thing is to make sure your mix when you want to be hired is perfect. It's really important. Think about implementation. You don't when you are the music is not shouldn't be самостоятельное музыкальное произведение. The game soundtrack is not a common track. It should have a context. You know, it should be represented by art, by gameplay. So you should think how exactly your track will be switched. For example, between the combat theme and the exploration theme. Yeah, is it clear? From the beginning, when you export the track, you should understand how, and from, for example, this point, track can be switched to the other track. Because if you do this bad, the player will play, and he will hear the bad music transition from one part to other, and it will be very noticed, and the engagement will be ruined. Because these things are really important, and people will hear it.
Can you tell a bit more how the transition is made? So, for example,
we can get back to questions after the presentation.
Yeah, it's a big question, so I talk about it later. Product is more important than self-realization. It's the thing that I forget about many times. For example, my last product is the 144 plane. Is a museum. So there is a real plane fuselage. And there is a museum in it. And in the cockpit, in the pilot's cabin, there's an AVS simulator. You know, we connected the all the buttons, all the
controls.
Yeah, we can control the game by the real plane's gear. And there is a sound. I recorded the sound of the planes in Kazan.
Plane building, factory.
Yeah. So and there is a game. You fly, you do the things, and everything sounds. There's reactive engines. There is a wind. There is a rain. Everything is cool. And I wanted to add my music in it because I believed that when the music plays, the thing I talked about before works, but when I walked into the plane and sit in the chair and turned up the volume, I understood that for realistic
Feeling?
for realistic feeling, there shouldn't be music at all. And so I was really upset because, oh my God, it's a museum, it's a plane. I worked so hard to make the music, and how it's frustrating to understand that. But I understand that the product, the plane, the experience is much more valuable than my self-realization. So I came to the game director and said, dude, we are rejecting the music. We're switching it off because only sound design works better. So you should remember this. When you work in the team, you do the product. Of course, you do some kind of self-realization, but it's collective work. Sometimes hard decisions need to be made. I have an experience in this. Actually, I forgot what does it mean because I fall asleep. Let me see. Yeah. There is a situation when you want a piece of music and come to the game director and says, look, it's cool. And he says, dude, I think strings should be replaced by the guitar. And you ask, but why? And he says, I think it's just better. The guitar sounds just better in this case than strings. If the only thing you can say that I'm a composer, I know better, the strings is cool. If this is the only thing you can say, you are not a professional. Because why? Your word is more authoritative than his. Yeah, you're a musician. You maybe you can know better. But what if you are misleading? Ошибаешься.
Mistaking.
What if you are mistaking? So when you work, you should know why and what you do. Everything. You should explain why there is a strings. Why it sounds like it sounds. It's really important. When you have a conversation like this, you should have an argument to every statement. And that's make you a professional. And people will believe you more than you show them that you know exactly what you are doing. And to impress them, you should really know what you are doing and why. You should explain yourself and them why there is a strings. Why. So. The good advice for the novices that well mixed and mastered simple track is way better than the complicated track without mixing and mastering. Because in the beginning of the career of a music producer, or if you as a game developer have the choice between a complicated, cool track and but with a ruined mixing and the simple track but sounds perfectly, you should understand that the simple track that sounds good is the way better. You can, as the composer, you can do tremendously ambitious things, but if this sounds really bad, no one accepts your work. And it's better to invest time in learning mixing and mastering techniques than to learn about arpeggios, for example, the partitures. Of course, music theory is really important because in the next step, the more you work, you will in competition with other composers who know both how to mix, master, and to apply the music theory. But when you started, focus on mixing and mastering. That's really important. So, the best way for me to have a reward from this meeting is you to follow me on Instagram. So, I guess that's all I wanted to say. Thank all of you. Thank for your questions, and you can ask some even more, and I try to explain. If you want to speak Russian, feel free. I guess Yegor will help me to translate. So, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
So, any questions?
Yeah, I had a question. When you talked about transition between tracks, how does this usually happen in a game? So, what is the best way to make a transition from one track to another?
From the music point of view, or from the game engine point of view?
From the music point of view, so.
The thing we're talking about now is an interactive music. Interactive music is the music that interacts with the player actions. So, the simplest situation.
I remember a very cool talk from Ivan, like 2 years ago.
1 year ago.
1 year ago.
Yeah, 1 year ago I had a lecture about the adaptive and interactive music. You can Google it or ask me a link, I give it to you. Where I told about the adaptive music and how it works. the simplest situation, you playing, for example, Skyrim, and there are two tracks, exploration track and combat track. Somehow programmers can say, is it combat or is it an exploration? In your sound engine, there is a parameter. Combat, no combat. And there's the tracks. When the parameter is 0 in this exploration, this track is being played on a loop, for example. But when from the game engine, when the game engine sends the 1 to the sound engine, it switched here to the combat. There are a few ways to do this. The first one, and the simplest one, is a crossfade. When there's a track, there's the other track, and this track is
decreasing quality.
it's fading, exactly, it's fading out, and this track is fading in. It's a crossfade. Actually, it's a bad method because this part usually sounds awful. The other technique is when your track is separated by some segments. There's the music plays. We're exploring the world. If here combat begins, the track will play to this point, and then from this point it will jump, for example, here. This method is way more effective because it's much more rhythmic, it's much more soft. What else can I tell about? Please, расширь вопрос. И что еще?
I think it's quite understandable. So, like, I wanted to know if there's this method because I know about crossfade, but I haven't heard about this one.
You totally watch the off the top, like about voice.
Voice on the point. Yeah, I tell shortly about the adaptive music. Adaptive music. There is a track. The main thing about this question that you should write the music to be able to. Вам нужно писать музыку заранее так, чтобы она легко переходила из одной в другую. Это нужно продумать заранее.
You have to be able to write your music in a way for it to be easily transferred from one track to another.
How do you export it? Like separate small pieces?
Yeah.
So it's actually different files.
Yeah. It's actually different files, but it takes lots of disk space, but it's the way you do. You can compress the bit rate and the sound will obtain less memory. It's totally fine. So there is a track. What you can do, you can separate it for the segments, and each segment you can separate to the instruments. For example, drum, piano, strings, etc. Then you put all these segments with all these instruments in the container and randomize it. Then when you hit the play button, a random segment with the random instruments will be played. That makes the, for example, 40 seconds music file very, very variative. This kind of music, it's not annoying. It's not such annoying as a looped track. There's a next step. What if we have, like in a Doom, industrial metal track it's really driving, it's really hard. And we know that there are two situations. The demon and no demon. We do the same. We separate our industrial metal track to the parties, to the instrument parts, to the instruments, put it into a container, randomize it, but we built a logic. When the game says us that there is no demon, the drums and the guitar is not playing. So where there is no demon, you hear just bass and, for example, spooky strings. It's totally fine. But when there is a demon, the container switches up guitars and drums, and the same track, it's the same music, becomes much more driving and engaging, etc. That's how adaptive music works. It's adapted to the situation. You can switch on and switch off different instruments, choose random parts of the track, depending on the game situation. For example, there's a dragon. There is no dragon. There is two dragons. There is, I don't know, Khajiit warrior, and etc. So that's how adaptive music works. I have a big lecture about it, and you should watch it, I guess.
Can you share a link to this lecture? Yeah, maybe to Kirill, and then he'll send it to us.
Yeah, I sent it to Kirill, and yeah, that's we. Как бы познакомились?
That's how you met?
That's how I met Kirill, the person who invited me here. We were in Dev Night. It's an event for Kazan game developers. We met there, and now I'm very pleased to be invited here. So, any questions? I can tell, for example, more about adaptive music, more about mixing, mastering, the aesthetics, everything.
How about actual applicable advices for novices? Like I have some understanding of music theory, but let's say I want to try myself at making music. What are your advices like for a young music maker?
I think the two most important advices. First, listen to the music. You should listen to everything, the pop, the hip hop, the metal, everything. You should just feed your brain with the content. That's again how the intuition works. You как будет осознавать?
Understand?
Нет.
Comprehend? Realize.
Comprehend, realize. You shouldn't realize why it sounds like it sounds, but that's the way your intuition works. When you start to produce, you have a background of your music listening time, And the second advice is to learn hard. Making music, it's a huge discipline. So, in the beginning, don't experiment, because you can waste years to understand that the C note, E note, and G note sounds fine together. You can go to the music theory teacher and you can know it in 20 seconds, because the musical laws rules are actually really simple. But if you will try to find out it by yourself, you can spend years. It's I don't know how to research the gravity law by yourself just from the beginning. There is an easy way, just to learn from a person who knows. So here it is. Listen to the music and learn the theory with the teacher, for example, or read the books. It's fine. It's the best way to do this.
Do I need a keyboard, like some MIDI keyboard to start? Is it possible to use actual type keys on the laptop?
Uh,
No? Do I need a...
Actually, you don't. I'm a pianist, so for me it's way easier to have physical keys. When I play it, to do. It's the way I work. But if you have no experience in playing the instruments, you don't need the gear controllers at all, because, as I said, in the DAWs, in sequencers, in the digital audio workstations, you can just put the note right in the place. This is C, this is E, there's a long B, for example. To produce notes, you don't really need the MIDI controller. It's the way you feel. You should, do whatever you want, what's more comfortable to you. Controller is not needed if you don't want to. For me, it's necessary because I'm a pianist, so it's the way easy for me to play music by my fingers. But for the other person, for example, for a dead mouse, the DJ, one of the best DJs I know, he can't play the piano at all, for example, and he produces interesting tracks with interesting chords, with sounds perfectly without controllers at all. It's fine. We're living in the great time when you have all the information on the internet, all the gear in the local store, and you even don't need to be a pianist or guitarist to make music. It's a really good time we live in. So, any other questions?
How hard is it to? I have an already soundtrack which I want to put in the game. How hard is it to just remix it and put it in the game? Not creating a soundtrack by yourself and using instruments.
So, for example, you have Stairway to Heaven, and you want to add it into your game. Yeah.
Yes, you have a music you listen to, and you want to add it to your game. How hard is it to do that? Just need to remix it, and I don't know the other.
Let me think a bit. First thing you should remember that the dynamic range I talked about, that even is the sound, is your track sounds perfectly, it simply sometimes can be used in the mix because of the dynamic range. But if the dynamic range is fine, then I don't really know is it hard to remix tracks. It really depends on the track. But if you have only one file, for example, the master file, there is the drums, piano, just a song. It's really hard. It's really complicated because you can't just remove drums from the part where you want to make a transition, for example. The situation is the way better when you write directly to the musician and say him, dude, please send me the instruments separated. Please send the guitar, the drums. When you have this, the problem is much easier to be solved. But when you have a master track in the master file, usually it's hard. When the popular DJs are doing their remixes, they work in collaboration. They, for example, send a letter to Eminem and says, "Hey, dude, Marshall, please give me the files." And that's the way the remixing DJs work. It's really rare when the DJs cut something from the master track, but it happens. So my answer, it's really hard. It's really hard, I think.
Yes, I have to communicate with the original composer and buy the the specific thing you want.
Sorry?
In your game. You have to buy the soundtrack from the composer, specific you need the specific instruments you want. You take them and you.
Maybe it works. I don't know. I have no experience in it. No one did this in my career. But maybe I just don't know. I have not answer. I have no answer.
No answer.
I have no answer.
In your field of your work, you create the sound from scratch. You don't use anything that already exists.
you have nothing at the beginning, right? When you start to create a track. So, I mean, you don't use any resources for your own tracks.
So,
This is
What-
a question. Yeah, this was a question.
what's the question?
Like, I mean, you haven't ever like used something already exists.
Me?
Like you create from the beginning all of it.
No, I didn't. Why should I? I have a piano, I have a synthesizer, I have a tiny, small, cheap guitar, and there is no reason why should I, for example, use AC/DC Thunderstruck or something. You just do it yourself. But you should understand that using other person works, it's totally fine if the person is agreed. Yeah, it's the way, for example, the rap music exists. They took a sample from an old track and make a beat, and read the sentence, but get live. For example, it's totally fine. It's a style. It's not, for example, the law, the rule. It's the way you think about creativity. You can do whatever you want if it's legal. And anything can be done. Personally, I don't use any other person's materials or tracks or something because I don't even thought about it. I just do things myself at all. But if you want to use some samples for Britney Spears, Toxic, and everything, you can have a listen and do it. It's totally fine. It may be interesting, I guess. So, everything else?
Suppose we have a kind of indie game that have a gameplay from 10 to 20 hours, for example, and just according to your experience, what is the average time to produce the all sounds for this game, including the gameplay sounds, background sounds, all the sounds that you have in the game? So what is the average time of your work for one kind of specific game, in average? Of course, it depends on the game, but in general.
To understand the answer, you should know how the game audio production works. There is not only sound effects and tracks. I show you.
There is a question about game development.
Yeah.
Which time you need to hire the sound producer to produce the music for the game?
First of all, you should understand what exactly does the audio director, the sound guy, First of all, he found a sound effects, the samples, for example. Oh, this would be the shot. Oh, this would be the death sound. The second part, he does the sound design. He takes the samples and turn it into an in-game sounds. He mixing them with each other. He makes adds some details to it. Sound design. It's a really creative work, sound design. I'm a sound designer too, and it's really interesting when you do the sound for games. I don't know, it's like a usual design. You download a bunch of pictures from the internet and make a landing from these parts. So then the sound guy should implement this into the game. It's a programmer's and sound designers' work. They should do the boss. So when you do the implementation, you spend money not only to the sound designer's work, but a programmer's work too. It's very important.
By programmer's work, you mean like?
Sound designer says, dude, this sound should be played when the player health is below 45%. And programmers, no, done. It's the time. It takes a long time. And if the programmer is programming adaptive music, it can be a really long time because the conditions of the music changes can be really complicated. Implementation, then mixing and mastering. Ладно. That's only the sound effects. Then the music. Research. Experiments. You should approve. Oh yeah, it sounds well. Oh no, it's rejected. Final production, when you say, yeah, that's fine, do this. The composer writes the whole track. Then, if the music is adaptive, for example, you, game designer, composer, and programmer build a logic of the music, when and why it switches. In this case, you waste time over three of employers: the composers, the game designers, and the programmers. Next step is implementation and mixing and mastering. So you can just download sound effects and download music from the internet. You should make a design from it. The musical design and the sound design, it takes time. For example, when I worked on the indie pixel 2D platform about the dog, just a platform, you're jumping, you're shooting things, I spent, let me remember, a year, I think. I wrote 12 minutes of adaptive music, designed the adaptive music logic, implemented it, mixed, mastered. I did the sound design. So here, yes, for average game indie, such as a pixel 2D platformer with 9 levels, I think I spent a year of my life to do this. That's because I did all the work myself. In the big studios, the tasks are separated. For example, one guy is searching for the samples, the other guy makes the sound design, the third guy mixing the soundtrack, the fourth guy mixing, for example, the whole game, etc. There's an audio director, there's a composer, sound designer, record engineering, mixing engineering. So maybe in case of your indie game, it's better to hire 2 people. For example, one sound designer, one composer, and make them work with each other. Or composer, sound designer, and mixing engineer. I think that the second case is better because, if all the novice composers are lacking of mastering and mixing skills. For example, if you pay less money to the sound designer composer and invest money to the mix and mastering guy, you will have better audio, I think. But if you're working with a friend, for example, who can do all the things, give him half year or a year.
And 3 times more money. Because he works with 3 people.
Yeah. Well, that's really important because when you are hiring a sound guy, it would be really dumb when you say, oh dude, you should just download the music and the sound from the internet and put it into a game. And he says, look, I should do this, and this, and your authority will be ruined because that shows your employee that you have no idea what are you doing. You should know what are you doing and why are you paying him the money. So that's the question. That's the answer. I'm sorry.
So I think it's the best way for any game development is just to make kind of gameplay prototypes and make a conversation with the sound producer, sound designer, and then together decide in which way it's better to work, right?
Yeah. The thing I forget to say that you can not necessarily hire, but invite a composer or sound designer, the sound guy, who will help you to design the sound concept. It's really important because it's totally fine when the game developers do not know anything about music production, the music dramaturgy, it's fine. Everyone should do their work. And you can invite, for example, I don't know, me, and ask, Ivan, we have a game, how should it sound? I will write a concept for you, and you will, for example, hire someone. It's you said the really important thing. The way you're thinking is amazing, and I want to all the game producers, the game bosses, do the same thing, think like you, because it's really the key. Just invite the person who knows how to do the sound and ask him for advice, even pay him for advice, do something. It's really important, because if you do things yourself and invite composer, sound designer later, you will give him bad conditions to work, because they're already done, everything is done, you have your own idea. And the worst situation, if you have your own idea and the person says it's a bad idea, but you keep standing on your point and says, no, do what I do, I pay money for you, do it, don't do this. Just a reminder, if you are saying something, have an argument for it. If you are a composer or if you're a game developer, that's the way the professional people work, I guess. So, like this. Any other questions?
Also, a more specific question. Can you advise good sound effects library? So, what you used in the games you worked on, for example, for the samples part. I mean.
Okay. There is three kind of libraries. Free libraries we can afford, and the libraries we cannot afford. The Hollywood quality cinematic libraries, it's tremendously expensive. It's not our case. So, there is a website. I don't know, something like this. Each year, they give away a huge 25 gigabytes pack of sound effects. They are really good. I use them because it's free. The website, SoundSnap.
It's with double N there.
Yeah, thanks. The other website, it's SoundSnap. SoundSnap. It has a subscription model. You pay for about $20 a month, I don't remember. And you have limitless access to their library. It's fine too. I use it, and I guess a couple of days ago, Unity has released their bundle that contains about 5,000 free sound effects. Free. It requires no license. Everything, you can just use it in commercial. It's fine. So yeah, look for the Unity bundle. And I guess that's the best solution to indie game developers, to medium game developers. It's the free packs from Sunny's, the subscription model for the SoundSnap, the Pixel 2D platformer that I told about. All the sounds we have from this website. All the samples, bunch of sounds I have synthesized myself with the Massive, with the Serum, and other synthesizers. So yeah. Here it is. So, any other questions, maybe? So, thank you again. That was really interesting for me because, have experience in English speaking is very rare for me. And it was really fun. Thank you. Sorry again for my speaking skills and everything, but I have a lot of fun of speaking with you. Thank you. Follow me on Instagram, don't forget.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for coming.
If you have some kind of private questions, I'm sitting here, you can just come up to me and we can have a conversation. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.